on Straight Talk Africa, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari says he is seeking re-election. The election is scheduled for February 16, 2019. The announcement was met with mixed reaction. That's coming up next right here on Straight Talk Africa. Hello, welcome to Straight Talk Africa, live from the Voice of America headquarters here in Washington. I am Shaka Sali.
And hello to all of our viewers and listeners on the continent and elsewhere. I'm Haiti Adams-Fitzpatrick. I'll be your social media reporter.
Today, it's a discussion on the significance of the Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari's announcement to seek re-election in 2019.
And coming up later, our audience has weighed in on our topic through emails, Facebook and Twitter comments. We'll reveal some of them ahead here on Straight Talk Africa.
Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has confirmed that he will seek his party's presidential ticket to contest elections in February 2019. His announcement ends months of speculation about his future. After bouts of ill health, my colleague Paul Cisco has more.
The inauguration of Muhammadu Buhari as the 15th president of Nigeria took place on May 29, 2015. It marked a new beginning for Buhari as head of state. It was an historic event and a great day for Nigerians. For the first time, a Nigerian incumbent went peacefully down to defeat in Africa's biggest democracy.
Our country has now joined community of nations that have used the ballot box to peacefully change an incumbent president in a free, fair election.
Then the former military and opposition leader was swept to victory over President Goodluck Jonathan.
I promised the country free and fair elections. I've kept my word. I've also expanded the space for Nigerians to participate in the democratic process.
On April 9th, following a meeting with executive members of the ruling All Progressive Congress, President Buhari announced on his Twitter account that he's seeking a spot on the APC's presidential ticket and a second victory and term in the nation's February 16, 2019 presidential poll. It remains unclear whether others in the party will challenge the incumbent. President Buhari spent part of 2017 in London receiving treatment for an undisclosed illness. After more than 100 days in the hospital, throngs of cheering Nigerians welcomed his return to Abuja last August. He met with British Prime Minister Theresa May at 10 Downing Street this week, at least in part for the meeting of the Commonwealth heads of government ongoing in Britain through Friday. Buhari became president under a faltering economy and facing severe security threats and challenges from the Boko Haram terrorist group. April 14th marked the 4th anniversary of the group's notorious kidnapping of nearly 300 schoolgirls in Chibok. The Boko Haram insurrection has been underway for nearly 9 years. It's estimated that the war has claimed tens of thousands of lives and displaced over 2 million people. Last year, the United States approved the sale of 12 military planes and security equipment worth $600 million to Nigeria to help fight terrorism. Meanwhile, Buhari's critics and those in opposition question the 75-year-old's fitness for office. They say the economy is still in disarray and he has not fulfilled his campaign promises to tackle corruption and insecurity in the country's northeast. On April 30th, President Buhari meets with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House. They'll discuss their partnership in the war on terror, trade, promoting economic growth and reforms, and building on Nigeria's role as a democratic leader in West Africa. Paul Cisco, V.O.A. News, Washington.
Thanks, Paul, for that interesting report. Joining us here in the studio are two distinguished guests. Karen Atiya, editor, Global Opinions at the Washington Post, and Ogbeni Lanle Banjo, former gubernatorial candidate of the southwestern Nigerian state of Ogun. Well, I have to say that I am profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to host the two of you on Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Last but not least is expected to be Adiola Fayem, host and producer Keeping It Real with Adiola. She will be joining us from V.O.A. studios in New York. Later in the program, we'll give you, our audience, a chance to call in with your question or comment. The number to call is 202-619-3111. The US country code is 1. Let me come to you immediately. Karen, you've been obviously covering the world and definitely Nigeria. When you heard that Nigerian incumbent President Buhari was seeking re-election, what was your immediate reaction?
I think I would say my immediate reaction, I just thought, considering Nigeria's demographics, considering the fact that more than half of the population is quite young, what message does it send that Buhari, is 75 years old, yes, has had questions with his health, is leading a country that is so incredibly young people who are frustrated, perhaps, with a lack of employment opportunities. And so I just thought, sort of, this is in keeping with the trend of African leaders. We think of Mugabe, for instance, African leaders who are from a generation that is perhaps not in touch or not in tune with the demographic shifts of young people that the country is facing. So I'm skeptical, at least, but it fits a pattern.
There's nothing particularly strange here because you know as well as I do that the average age of leaders or rulers in Africa is around 60, 65.
Why does that happen? When can the young people have a chance, perhaps, to be able to rise up in politics in Africa?
Will probably tell us later in the discussion. Sure. What about you, Lanley?
I am not shocked.
Why?
Someone in comfort wants to die in comfort. He has every right to say he wants to contest or seek re-election again, but Nigerians have every right to vote him out and disgrace him. So that's why I'm not really shocked, given his poor performance.
But in fairness to President Buhari,
yes,
you're not really your typical African president, because this is a man, frankly, who is, for example, incorruptible. He's not someone, frankly, that you could call a thief.
Well, Shaka, if you remember, I was right here in this studio in March of 2015 campaigning for President Buhari, but he disappointed me. He disappointed a lot of visionary Nigerians. When he came to power, first of all, here is someone who was a minister of petroleum, someone who was a governor, a head of state, a governor when he was in military, someone who was a head of state when he overthrew President Shehu Shagari, someone who worked with Abacha in contravention of the June 12th election and became the chairman of Petroleum Trust Fund. When he said to all of us, if he became the president again, the price of petroleum will decline. That price rose by 67%. Someone who told all of us that at 71, he could not be as effective as he was when he was head of state. You ask him at 75, what was he going to do? Or at 76, if he wins next year, which I hope he will not win. But this gentleman, I said he had disappointed people like me because he brought out what fella called the beast.
Meaning?
Now, before Buhari came to power, we have had our fellow Fulanis all over the West, all over Africa. He came to power, these Fulani were just killing, committing genocide all over the country, especially in Benue. My president did not act. That is one. Number two, all we are hearing is that he's fighting corruption. How can you fight corruption without asking yourself, somebody stole billions, he siphoned these billions out of the country to another country. How was he able to do it? And then establish policies to discourage it. this government is not doing that. And then government corruption is also growing under him. And when anytime they either arrested or caught someone serving him, they will find an excuse. So it goes on and on. Then the value of our naira again declined by 70%. I mean, that's not what I came here to say when I was campaigning for President Muhammadu Buhari.
Now, Khalid, let's face it, President Buhari ran on security, curbing corruption, and the economy, of course, was very stupid. What does the report card look like so far?
I mean, well, first of all, it's interesting that your package talked about this as a 4-year anniversary of the Chibok girls' kidnapping, and it's arguably so, that the Goodluck Jonathan administration, that really sort of dealt a death blow to the Goodluck Jonathan administration, not for the very least on the international stage. So far, okay, Boko Haram is still active. Boko Haram is still able to kidnap girls, still able to launch suicide attacks. It's nowhere near the level it was 2015, where they were actively capturing and holding territory and pushing the military out. However, he did declare that there was a technical victory over Boko Haram, and it's very clear that Boko Haram is still here, still active. And at the very least, you know, the government has negotiated, and there are reports of the government a £3 million ransom to secure the release of some kidnapped girls. But you know, this, especially when it comes to the relations with the United States, a lot of the Nigeria's position has been to the United States, well, we need more help. We need you to sell us more equipment, more military equipment, more aircraft. In my view, whether or not the war on Boko Haram can be won in the air, or whether any war can be won in the air, I highly doubt. And I think there's plenty of cases where more active intelligence gathering really is the way forward in this. But yeah, as far as his report card, it's still very mixed. Again, on economics, and Nigeria just came out of, or hasn't come out of, serious recession. The prices of oil have fallen. Nigeria still has a checkered record, I think, on that. But he has said all the right things. The fact that he does have a meeting with Trump, and that he was one of the first African leaders that Trump called when he came to office, is significant. Nigeria cannot be ignored from the American perspective. It is one of the most powerful and significant countries on the continent. But again, I think there are a lot of people here in Washington who did expect more, who did expect a lot from Buhari, perhaps unfairly. But I still think, you know, we still have to judge him by what he was measured up against in the beginning. He inherited a very sort of dicey situation.
Very difficult situation. I mean, in fairness to him, really, let's face it, you touched on the issue of Boko Haram. When he came into power, when he went to Abuja, Aso Rock, let's face it, when you talk about Boko Haram occupied territory, almost, in fact, the size of the kingdom of Belgium. The last time I checked, they no longer hold any territory anywhere. Isn't that correct, Landon?
Well, the issue of Boko Haram is dicey. And this is why I said so. Before President Muhammadu Buhari came to power, he supported, not actively, not overtly, Boko Haram. He made statements in support of Boko Haram.
Where is the evidence?
It's in the paper.
Bring the evidence.
Yes. I mean, it's in the paper that he said Boko Haram should be treated the same way Niger Delta are treated. In other words, we should negotiate exactly with amnesty. So, and as we speak, his Attorney General just issued a statement that the International Crime ICC cannot investigate all this genocide committed by Boko Haram. Why are they saying that if that would not lead to somebody being behind them? So it's a shenanigan.
But when we talk about Boko Haram, we talk about, you know, Boko Haram, what are the fundamental root causes, frankly, of their existence?
Only those who are in power, including President Buhari, can tell you the truth. Oh, I cannot tell you the truth. I'm telling you, that is it. But let me say this, my fellow. I mean, let's not deceive ourselves. Anytime any sitting American government calls any of his, let me say, use the word boys in these African countries, it's about American interest, not about my interest. So if you call Donald Trump calling, that doesn't affect me. They will sit him to the table. He's in London now, speaking with their mother, coming to speak with the father on April 30th. Nothing there will be nothing there for the interest of Nigerians.
Landley, you really have to be fair to President Buhari, because let's face it, the last time I checked, the reason he is in London is attending a Commonwealth conference.
Yes.
So what's the problem? What's the problem with that?
There is no problem with that. All I'm just saying is that when you now meet with the Prime Minister in London, Theresa, you speak for Nigerians. The last time that he was there, the former Prime Minister said Nigerians are fantastically corrupt. If I were the president, I would have asked him, how can Nigeria be fantastically corrupt when you stole all over African countries and you call yourself Great Britain?
But actually, I think he did a bit of that to David Cameron.
Sure. I mean, I don't want to, and I've written plenty about America's sort of over-militarized policy towards the continent. I think a lot of what needs to be done from the American side is look more at Africa and Nigeria as a source of trade, as a source of more equal partnership. I agree with you there. But remember when Buhari came the last time and he demanded of the Americans, we want your help in locating our stolen wealth. That is something that America does have the capacity to do. So I think that is in the interest of Nigerians, to come here and try to find out where its wealth is being hidden and plundered. And I hope he brings that up as part of the agenda. And I think it's fair to ask Buhari to come to the United States and press for the interests of Nigerians. And I think that would be trade. And I think that would be job creation. I think that would be help, any sort of assistance in managing this population sort of boom that they're going through. But it is a special and it's an important relationship, and I don't want to just dismiss it out of hand. But again, I think you're right. It's on the African leaders to come aggressively with their own agendas and present their cases.
What about the issue of corruption, Land? I mean, let's face it, you are a Nigerian, you've lived there off and on and all that kind of stuff, and you tried several times to become the governor of Ogun State in Abeokuta, correct?
Yes.
I mean, let's face it, when you talk about corruption in Nigeria, my friend, you know what you're talking about. You know what you're up to, because corruption in Nigeria is not benign, is malignant, is institutionalized, really. Do you sincerely think, if you were to talk to me from the deepest, better part of the bottom of your Nigerian heart and soul, that anybody could, in fact, curb corruption in Nigeria in the last 3 years?
Well, I have been there, I am still there, and I'm working in their midst. President Buhari alone cannot curb and fight corruption. It's absolutely impossible.
But he has tried. Well, and he seems to be still trying, let's face it.
What I'm saying is this. $3something million were stolen by Abacha. When Obasanjo was there. $386 million.
Only that?
No, it's as part of what was recovered from Switzerland.
Oh, you mean what has been recovered so far?
Yes. Yeah. Today, as we are speaking, President Buhari's Attorney General is asking the recovery again to be renegotiated. And the attorney in Switzerland said nothing to be renegotiated. He had completed the job. The Attorney General under President Buhari wants to be paid $17 million. My sister, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, had to stop that. We did not hear from President Buhari on this issue. And what I'm telling you is, yes, it's good to make noise about corruption. When he first came there, everybody was scared. But as they settled down, people started their corruption again. The point is that to fight corruption, you have to ask yourself, how are all this money being stolen? what can we do to stop it? That is not being done.
And
then the money that they took, they're not telling us how they spend it.
If you were the man occupying Asorok right now, talk to us what you would actually specifically do in order to fight and win the victory against corruption in Nigeria.
That's exactly what I just said. I will first of all study, I will get my experts together to study how those monies were stolen. Those are loopholes.
So how do you know he's not doing that?
He is not doing it, because if he's not doing it, people working in his cabinet as we speak will not be doing the same thing. I just give an example of this Attorney General.
You've been trying to be governor of Ogun State.
Yes.
I just completed a book written by a daughter of former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo. We're talking about Dr. Iyabo Obasanjo.
Yes.
African president's daughter.
Yes.
She was a commissioner for some years in Abeokuta.
Yes.
She was a senator in Abuja.
Yes.
And if you read that book, to be very honest with you, once again, this is not a very, very easy thing to deal with.
I agree with you. I'm going through it as I'm sitting here. Where you read to people, this is what the corporate governors of Nigeria say. And these crooks don't want change. They will gang up against me. They gang up against me. However, I still insist. And when they observe that I'm insisting, they blend. It's not easy. Even here, there is corruption in the United States. However, because there's institution there, there are laws there, and people have been caught, people have been jailed. So that's the difference. But over there, we're still with impunity.
So what kind of leadership do you sincerely think that Nigeria needs, frankly? Because let's face it, there is a saying that no society gets a leadership that it desires, but rather what you get actually is what you deserve.
Well, because Nigerians, I'm going to be frank with you, Nigerians have been voting their values. In other words, take money for vote. That's why we're having this. Hopefully, with this Buhari thing, they will learn from it, and let's pray that they will reject money for vote. That will bring the good leadership.
And I think this is not just Nigeria, but these political systems in general. The fact that, again, we're talking about how much can Buhari do in just 3 years, and it's giving me deja vu, the fact that we're already going through elections next year in 2019. And so this question, again, of the incentives and whether or not these leaders are being given enough time sometimes to be able to carry out their agendas. And again, the fact that he's going to be going into perhaps campaign mode instead of, maybe some would say, instead of working on some of these issues, working on some of these problems ahead in the next year, is just something that is not only endemic to Africa, but even here in the United States, when you're in continual sort of campaign mode. Again, some would use that as an example for people to stay in power for life. I'm not arguing that, but just to consider, is 4 years for any country, especially one with as many issues as Nigeria does, as many people as Nigeria does, is 4 years really enough to really realistically, to be realistic and expect change? No,
my friend. Number one, you have to understand, that's why I gave you his background. He has been a head of state. He has been ministers. Being a head of state in any country, you are privy to certain information. We have Federal Executive Council that he is supposed to be attending. He refrained from attending it on principles which I...
But you don't work alone.
Let me finish. No, but he's privy to certain information. This gentleman has contested 3 times to be president of Nigeria. So I expected him to have got some plans.
But running for office doesn't mean you know...
No. But he's like me, though. He's privy to certain information.
Sure, okay. Let's face it, Landry. There is a saying, and you should really be very, very, aware of it, that when someone is running for office, they actually do it in poetry.
I agree.
They promise heaven on earth. But when they get into office, governing, when it comes to the business of governing, they actually do it in prose.
I agree.
Correct?
Correct, but what I'm saying...
So what's your problem?
It's not my problem.
Keep referring, to the background of the man.
What I'm saying is that for someone who had contested 3 times, it shouldn't take him 3 months to have a chief of staff. It should not take him 6 months to fill his cabinet. It should not take him 23 months to have head of agencies. And then when you now become the president, you now hear or see on television that INEC, which is our electoral body, is registering kids. Kids. And President said nothing because that's part of his country.
We'll come to that later. Karen, let me come to you. In 2009, I was in the Ghanaian capital, Accra, with President Barack Obama.
Oh, I was there.
When he addressed the continent and talked about how Africa does not need strong men. It needs strong institutions. And of course, he talked the talk, but frankly, it didn't seem to walk that talk for Africa. What about Nigeria? What does it really need?
What does it really need? I mean, I think, first of all, I think if you ask many Nigerians, first of all, they'll want jobs. I think very just individual security. I was listening to a program on the BBC just a few days ago about men in Nigeria and how sort of this issue of polygamy and marrying multiple wives or having multiple women, but the insecurity that men...
Can they support them?
That was the issue. There was a gentleman who was like, oh, I have 2 wives. He has 3 wives, and they asked, well, if you could, or do you regret taking the 3rd wife because you can't support them? He's like, and they looked around, to see if the wife was around, and honestly, he said he regretted it because so much of what his identity was as a person is about whether or not he can provide for people or provide for his family and provide for not only his family but the community, right? So I think, what Nigeria needs, yes, is institutions, but I think just like here in the United States, when you talk of, oh, we need institutional reform, for most people, I think it's the same everywhere. They want to know that they'll be able to provide for their families, and they want to know that they'll be able to have lights on, electricity from day to day. I mean, that was an issue also in Ghana recently as well, the rolling blackouts, and also just how they want to know that they'll have an opportunity. So again, I think with Buhari and with the state of Nigeria, the fact that I think, first of all, when it comes to economic issues, Nigeria depending so long on its oil wells for its income, which obviously has led to the fantastic spread of corruption, but also has left it permanently economically vulnerable. So I would think is to have institutions that are able to diversify the economy. Can Lagos be Africa's next Silicon Valley? We remember Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, visited Lagos in 2013.